Hello and welcome to On the Trail with Miles James Dean. In the previous episode, I spoke about the 3 horses I separately acquired while traveling in the states of West Virginia and Kentucky, who were either friendly or unfriendly with Sankofa, my stallion, and my main horse. There was Dooley, with whom Sankofa flew over the cuckoo's nest and briefly disappeared into the Appalachian Mountains, and who was swiftly traded in Kentucky for a horse named Bo, who had a devilish side to him, and faster than the word swiftly was given back to his owner, and I was back to depending on Sankofa for the daily mileage. Also in the previous episode was my interview with Dr. Ann Butler, an African-American scholar, historian, and teacher whose life's work will leave stories preserved about her humanitarian work that clearly identifies her as an ancestor, which is an honor not ascribed to everyone in their passing. As my followers know, a major part of my journey across the United States was an historical exploration into the contributions of African and African-American slaves and their descendants to the exploration, expansion, and development of the United States during a period when the horse was the major mode of transportation, and in each state I traveled had its theme, and here in Kentucky, the focus was on the black jockeys. Prior to interviewing with Dr. Butler, I visited the Kentucky Horse Park in Lexington and arrived on or about November the 22nd. It was there that stood a monument to a horse as the greatest horse of the 20th century, Man of War. Is a picture of that great, magnificent, impressive horse who had a racing record of 21 wins and only 1 loss. The statue stood about 10 feet in height, and on the day that I arrived, it was surrounded by several reporters from local media stations to photograph this cowboy who, while on a historic ride from New York to California, was entering the horse park to apparently stop at the most popular destination of many tourists. But those same reporters began to scramble as I rode past the statue and rode up to the engraved bust of one who is known as the greatest jockey of all time, the son of a former slave and the Muhammad Ali of jockeys, is Isaac Murphy. When the media finally repositioned themselves, I said, "This is the site I came to visit." The article that was written in the City Region Kentucky newspaper was entitled "Riding into History." I'll try to put a link in the website, so if you want, you can read the article for yourself. It was after my visit with Dr. Ann Butler that I jumped into the truck and drove about 50 miles south to Irvine, Kentucky, to visit the facilities that stable the Kentucky Mountain Saddlebred horses. If you recall, the president of the Kentucky Mountain Saddlebred Association gifted me the horse named Sonny. And let me say this about that horse that convinced me before I even rode him that, like in the Matrix, he was the one. Here's what happened. The trailer gate was lowered And as Sonny began to back himself out of the trailer, for whatever reason, he lost his footing and began slipping and struggling to maintain his balance. And the stomping of the feet sent flashbacks into my mind about the stomping that Bo had done in my trailer on the day he turned into the devil and had his brain fart. So I stepped back, not wanting any part of the action that I thought was about to be coming my way. And then he completely lost his balance and dropped to his knees. But he had slid under the crossbar, and when he tried to stand up, was knocked back down by the crossbar. And that was when I stepped further back, thinking that he was ready to go into panic mode. But instead, he just calmly sat there and waited for someone to go into the trailer and unhook the crossbar so that he could stand up. Had that had been Bo, all hell would have broken loose. But the difference between Bo and Sonny was like night and day. And I knew instantly that he was a better horse than a millionaire's money can buy. Yes, for one, this horse had an amazing temperament. Secondly, while riding on him, I felt like I was riding on air. I could drink a glass of water and not spill a drop, and it didn't matter what gait he was in, whether he was at a walk, a running walk, or a lope. And thirdly, he wasn't a jumper like Dooley, and I could begin using my portable corral again. While acquiring Sonny was the beginning of a new relationship, I was at the end of another relationship, in that Joyce, who had been my driver since day one, was now leaving to go back home in California. She had fulfilled her commitment to be my driver up to this point, and it was now time for her to return home. She was dependable as the day was long, and her driving and coordinating skills kept the horses and myself safe. On the day Joyce flew out, Jim flew in. Now, remember, he had to get the okay from his better half to get on the road for a few days to drive to Lewisburg, West Virginia to pick up Blaze, the first horse that I had to let go. And now Jim was back with me. There's a picture of him up on the left, and there's a picture of myself feeding my first deer in the horse park area. Well, look, I don't know what kind of hoops Jim had to go through to get that kind of time away from home, because he was committed to go to be with me through Kentucky, Tennessee, and Arkansas. But, cowboys do what cowboys do. And by the way, having a good friend and a good horseman along was like being in a Glenn Ford and Henry Fonda movie, in so much as whatever one liked just tickled the other one half to death. I rode into Louisville, Kentucky, and to Churchill Downs to visit the track where 15 of the first 28 Kentucky Derby winning jockeys were black, and where I first envisioned the concept of bringing hundreds of horsemen and women into Kentucky to celebrate the Day of the Black Jockey. Unfortunately, that did not materialize. But, I'll soon update my website so that you can see the promotion that was for that Day of the Black Jockey. The administration at Kentucky Downs gave me the permission to visit behind the scenes and see some of the training sessions, and also where the jockeys lived while working their thoroughbreds. I was pretty impressed by some of what I saw, and not impressed by other things that perhaps over time those things have changed. Before I acquired Sunny, I was able to ride more than, well, approximately 20 miles each day on an average, and primarily because of three things. One, the inner city traveling conditions. Two, the inability of the second horse to either be ridden in certain traffic conditions or simply not having the temperament to deal with the daily routine. And third, the inability to match the pace that Sankofa set, which was 10 miles an hour at a lope. However, with the acquisition of my new Kentucky Mountain Saddlebred horse, my daily riding mileage went up from an average of 20 to an average of 40 miles a day. Yes, it doubled. I would start out at about 9 in the morning and ride Sankofa for 1 hour at a lope, covering 10 miles. Then I would meet with Jim, who had Sunny saddled and waiting, and this was one of the perks of having him around, and I would get on Sunny at about 10:30 while Jim was cooling down Sankofa, and I would begin to ride Sunny and cover another 10 miles at the running walk that he gave me. So at about 11:30, I stopped and would meet up with Jim again, who would take Sunny, undress him, cool him down, and having covered 20 miles that morning, we would stop and have lunch, relax. Then around 1 p.m., I would start the same routine for the afternoon ride. An hour on one and then another hour on the other, covering another 20 miles. And at around 4 o'clock or so, we were ready to look for a camping spot. 40 miles, 20 in the morning and 20 in the afternoon. And that would become our consistent routine as long as we had good ground to ride on, meaning that traffic and lots of shoulder or median to ride on that would allow Sankofa especially to lope. So as we moved further westward, the conditions became more favorable for those long day rides. But little did I know that having relieved Sankofa from the stress of the day-by-day hours of working under saddle, the physical stress of working in the saddle had shifted to me. And 40 hours a day in the saddle would eventually take a toll on me. So after leaving Churchill Downs, I headed toward Nashville, Tennessee. There you see me on that highway. Watching the cows as they watch me go by. So, on about by December, we were in Franklin, Kentucky, and at the Tractor Supply store in Franklin, where we stocked up on some feed and other supplies, and as always found ourselves being interviewed by the locals who were curious about the adventure and its mission. And we were also told that there was a black cowboy who frequently came into the store and that he would most likely want to meet us. And since we were staying at a campsite not far away for the night, that they would try to connect or let him know where we were. And sure enough, that evening there was a knock on the door, and standing outside was the man himself, Cowboy Reggie. Yes, there's he and Jim on the left, and he and I on the right. Reggie was a very interesting guy, and he rode a Mustang. Well, he broke him himself. And the Mustang didn't wear shoes either. We stayed up all night talking. and about everything under the sun or moon. And it was so late that we were so tired in the morning that we couldn't head out. I was going to Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee, which is only about a day's ride from Franklin, for another interview with another leading historian. So I could cover that in one day. But again, we were so tired that we had to stay another day in Franklin. So on Saturday, the morning of December the 8th, accompanied by Reggie on his Mustang, we began our ride. Reggie knew a shortcut, so he became our guide. En route, we made a stop at this watering hole where we were introduced to some of his acquaintances, and then another watering hole to chat with some more acquaintances, and yet another watering hole for another introduction and more chit-chats. Now look, some of you may remember that back in episode 3, there were extending circumstances that permitted me to ride safely at night, reaching my destination shortly after 7, which was after the sun had set. Well, Reggie had taken me to so many watering holes that 1, it was now 9 p.m. 2, we had only covered 20 miles or so. And 3, we were in some heavy, busy traffic road conditions. And 4, the only visibility that we had in front of us were the lights from the truck and trailer behind us. That itself was a one-day odyssey. I don't honestly remember where we spent that night, but what I do know is that we slept all night, straight through the night. So that Sunday, we finally entered Nashville, and we were met by one of Nashville's finest. Yeah, a very, very interesting man who had a horse farm, and invited us to stay over and brought our horses out. Really, really nice officer. So that morning, he came into our trailer before leaving to go to work, and ignoring the array of arsenal that was lying on the table, he said his goodbyes, and soon after we were off to Fisk University. Fisk University, HBCU, founded in 1866, shortly after the end of the Civil War, as Fisk Free Colored School, and one of several founded across the South by the American Missionary Association, which was a Protestant abolitionist group for the purposes of educating freed slaves. There you see, I think that's the library at Fisk, and also down at the right you see Dr. Mitchell, and also how long my hair was at that time. So here is an excerpt of Dr. Mitchell talking about that theme.
Because you had Americans killing Americans. If you were injured in the war, you were probably going to lose your life because of poor medical facilities. So this great national conflict wasn't caused by freedom for my people and I. But a historian named William Dunning, teaching in the 1890s, re-looked at the causation of the war. And it's those Dunning School historians that attributed to freedom for African Americans.
Okay. Let's see. Dr. Mitchell offered a very interesting perspective on the causation of the Civil War. So I encourage you to read his or listen to his entire interview on the website on YouTube, my YouTube channel. Also there at Fisk, children from a private school that had walked over to visit with the horses. Upper left, you see the children and the two teachers. On the right, there with Sankofa on the left. At the bottom, there with one child who I needed to pick her up because she was a little intimidated, but she did stroke Sonny. And there at the bottom right, of course, you see Dr. Fisk and students. So also, while in Nashville, I was taken to the Nashville cemetery, and there was the final resting place for more than 1,900 United States colored troops. These soldiers represented 30 U.S. colored regiments buried there at the site, and the cemetery marks an honored end of their journey, which for nearly all of them began with enslavement. As mentioned in several episodes, it was my desire to use the journey to creatively share a part of the history and the acknowledgement of the black men and women who, with their skill sets and determination and perseverance, made major contributions to the exploration, settlement, and expansion of the United States, again, during the time when the horse was a major mode of transportation. A rich history written by scholars and intellectuals whose tireless efforts in the researching and documentation of our legacy will forever be preserved in the libraries and in the government archives long after their passing. And it was my humbling privilege to have been able, while on the journey, to share moments of time in the accompaniment of several of the gatekeepers of our history. Dr. Revis L. Mitchell unfortunately passed away in 2020 at the age of 72. So, I'm going to end the podcast here in Nashville, and in our next episode, reveal what was probably the most challenging part of the journey from New York to California. So, stay tuned for that. Pay close attention. And as in the famous words of Roy, happy trails to you. Until we meet again.